thought she was alone when she found the money, but someone was listening from the shadows. What she says next could change everything, or cost someone their life. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The rain fell in sheets across Boston's cobblestone streets, turning the evening of March 1897 into a symphony of pattering drops against window panes and the distant clip-clop of horse-drawn carriages. Detective James Whitmore stood beneath the gas lamp outside the Pemberton Hotel, his dark overcoat glistening with moisture as he watched the elegant facade of the establishment. At 32 years of age, he had built a reputation as one of the city's most thorough investigators, a man who noticed details others overlooked and possessed an uncanny ability to read the truth in people's faces. Tonight, however, his mind wandered to thoughts beyond his current assignment. The case of the missing industrial bonds had brought him to this upscale establishment, where wealthy patrons came and went with secrets tucked beneath their fine clothing and practiced smiles. James adjusted his bowler hat and stepped through the revolving doors, entering a world of polished mahogany, crystal chandeliers, and the soft murmur of refined conversation. The lobby smelled of expensive cigars and rosewater. Ladies in elaborate gowns swept past with their escorts, their laughter tinkling like wind chimes. James approached the front desk, where a meticulously groomed clerk eyed him with barely concealed suspicion. "Good evening, sir. May I assist you?" the clerk asked, his tone suggesting he hoped the answer would be no. "Detective James Whitmore, Boston Police Department," James said quietly, producing his credentials. "I need information regarding a guest who checked in 3 days ago, a Mr. Harold Ashton." The clerk's expression tightened. "I'm afraid our guest's privacy is of utmost importance, Detective, as is solving a theft of considerable magnitude," James replied, his steel-gray eyes unwavering. "Mr. Ashton is believed to have information pertinent to my investigation. I don't wish to cause a disturbance, but I can return with a warrant if necessary." Before the clerk could respond, a commotion near the grand staircase drew their attention. A woman's voice, clear and distressed, carried across the lobby. James turned to see a young lady descending the stairs with hurried steps, her emerald green dress swishing against the carpeted steps. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, with auburn hair styled in the fashion of the day, her face flushed with obvious agitation. "Someone must help," she was saying to anyone who would listen. "My employer, Mrs. Catherine Hartley, has fallen terribly ill. We need a physician immediately." James found himself moving toward her before conscious thought directed his feet. Something about her genuine distress called to his protective instincts. As he drew closer, he noticed the striking intelligence in her hazel eyes, the graceful way she carried herself despite her obvious concern, and the delicate tremor in her gloved hands. "Miss, please calm yourself," James said gently, reaching her side. "I'm Detective James Whitmore. Tell me what has happened." The young woman looked up at him, and for a moment, their gazes locked. James felt an unexpected jolt, as if he had been struck by lightning. Her eyes held depths of emotion and character that immediately intrigued him. She was beautiful, certainly, with porcelain skin and features that would have made Renaissance painters weep, but it was the intelligence and warmth radiating from her that truly captured his attention. "Detective," she said, her voice steadier now that someone had offered assistance. "I'm Miss Charlotte Brennan, companion to Mrs. Catherine Hartley. We arrived in Boston 2 days ago from Philadelphia. This evening, Mrs. Hartley complained of terrible stomach pains and has been violently ill. I fear she may have been poisoned." The word hung in the air between them like a challenge. James felt his detective instincts sharpen immediately. "Poisoned? That's a serious accusation, Miss Brennan. What makes you suspect such a thing?" Charlotte's hands twisted together, and James noticed she wore simple but elegant gloves, suggesting good taste rather than great wealth. "Mrs. Hartley received a gift this afternoon, a box of chocolates from an unknown sender. She ate several pieces, and within the hour she became dreadfully ill. The symptoms, they're not like any natural illness I've witnessed." "Has a physician been summoned?" James asked, already mentally cataloging the details. "The hotel is sending for Dr. Morrison, but I thought someone should know in case." Charlotte's voice faltered and tears threatened at the corners of her eyes. "Mrs. Hartley has been so kind to me. She's the widow of a prominent banker, you see, and she took me into her employment when I had nowhere else to turn. If something happens to her because I failed to protect her, James placed a reassuring hand on her arm, the gesture both professional and somehow more intimate than he intended. "You're doing exactly the right thing, Miss Brennan. Take me to Mrs. Hartley's room. I'll need to see the chocolates and assess the situation." Charlotte nodded gratefully, and together they ascended the grand staircase. James was acutely aware of her presence beside him, the faint scent of lavender that seemed to surround her, the rustle of her dress, the way her breath came in small, worried gasps. He had investigated hundreds of cases, spoken with countless witnesses, but something about Charlotte Brennan affected him differently. They reached the third floor, and Charlotte led him down a gas-lit corridor to room 307. She produced a key from her small purse and unlocked the door. Inside, an older woman lay on the bed, her face pale and covered in perspiration. A maid stood nearby, wringing her hands anxiously. "Mrs. Hartley." Charlotte rushed to the bedside, taking the woman's hand. "A detective is here. You're going to be all right." James approached carefully, his trained eye taking in every detail of the room. It was a suite, actually, with a sitting area and a separate bedroom. On the table by the window sat an ornate box of chocolates, several pieces missing. He moved toward it, examining the box without touching it. "Miss Brennan, did Mrs. Hartley tell you who she thought might have sent these?" James asked, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket to handle the box. "She had no idea," Charlotte replied, her attention divided between the detective and her employer. The card simply said, "For your continued health and happiness." There was no signature. James picked up one of the remaining chocolates, studying it carefully. The chocolate appeared normal, but he had learned never to trust appearances. "I'll need to take these for analysis. The police laboratory can determine if they contain any harmful substances." At that moment, Dr. Morrison arrived, a distinguished gentleman with silver hair and a black medical bag. He immediately set about examining Mrs. Hartley, asking questions about her symptoms and what she had consumed. James stepped back, allowing the physician to work, but his attention remained fixed on Charlotte. She stood near the window now, watching the rain streak down the glass, her profile illuminated by the soft glow of the gas lamps. There was something ethereal about her in that moment, something that made James's heart beat faster in his chest. He had always been a practical man, focused on facts and evidence, yet here he stood, thoroughly distracted by a woman he had known for less than 20 minutes. "Detective Whitmore," Charlotte said softly, not turning from the window. "Do you truly believe someone tried to harm Mrs. Hartley? Or might it simply be an unfortunate coincidence? Perhaps spoiled chocolate?" James moved to stand beside her, maintaining a respectful distance yet close enough that he could speak quietly without being overheard by the others in the room. "In my experience, Miss Brennan, coincidences are rare. Anonymous gifts followed by sudden illness merit serious investigation." She turned to look at him then, and again James felt that strange connection, as if invisible threads were being woven between them. "Mrs. Hartley is not just my employer, Detective. She's been like family to me. My own parents passed away 3 years ago, leaving me with very little. Mrs. Hartley gave me not just employment, but dignity and kindness. If someone seeks to harm her, I want to help you find them." "That's admirable, Miss Brennan, but investigation can be dangerous work," James said, though part of him thrilled at the thought of working alongside her, of having reason to see her again. "However, I will need to ask you questions, gather information about Mrs. Hartley's associations, anyone who might wish her ill." "Then I am at your disposal, Detective," Charlotte replied with quiet determination. "Whatever you need to know, I shall tell you." Dr. Morrison approached them, his expression grave but not panicked. "Mrs. Hartley will recover, though she's had quite a shock to her system. I've given her something to help with the nausea and pain. She needs rest and should take only clear liquids for the next day or so. Whether this was poisoning or severe food illness, I cannot say definitively without laboratory analysis of what she consumed. I'll see to that immediately," James assured him. He turned to Charlotte. "Miss Brennan, I know this has been distressing, but I need you to think carefully. Has Mrs. Hartley mentioned any conflicts, any business dealings that might have gone poorly, any individuals who seemed overly interested in her affairs?" Charlotte pressed her fingers to her temples, thinking. "Mrs. Hartley is a wealthy woman, Detective. Since her husband's passing 2 years ago, she has control of a considerable fortune. There have been several gentlemen who have sought her favor, hoping, I suspect, for financial benefit. But she is shrewd and has rejected their advances." "Do you recall any names?" James asked, withdrawing a small notebook from his coat pocket. Mr. Lawrence Pemberton was quite persistent until recently, and there was a distant cousin, Mr. Edmund Hartley, who contested the will after her husband died, though the courts ruled in her favor. Both men were quite angry when things didn't go their way. James wrote the names carefully, his mind already forming theories and lines of investigation. This is helpful, Miss Brennan. I'll need to speak with you more extensively, perhaps tomorrow when Mrs. Hartley is resting more comfortably. Would you be amenable to meeting me, perhaps at the hotel's tea room around 2 o'clock? Yes, of course, Charlotte agreed, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. Whatever assists your investigation, Detective Whitmore. As James prepared to leave with the box of chocolates secured as evidence, he found himself reluctant to go. The room suddenly seemed warmer, more alive with Charlotte in it. He told himself it was merely professional interest, that any dedicated detective would feel the same urgency to protect an innocent woman from potential danger. But deep in his heart, James knew it was something more, something he had never experienced before. Miss Brennan, he said, pausing at the door, please be vigilant tonight. Lock your door and trust no one you don't know. If this was indeed an attempt on Mrs. Hartley's life, whoever did it may try again. Charlotte's eyes widened slightly, and James saw fear flicker across her features, but she straightened her shoulders with admirable courage. I understand, Detective. Thank you for your concern and your assistance. James tipped his hat to her and left the room, but his thoughts remained behind with the auburn-haired woman whose distress had called to something deep within his soul. As he descended the hotel stairs and stepped back into the rain-soaked night, James realized that this case had become personal in a way no other had before. He would solve this mystery, protect Charlotte and Mrs. Hartley from whoever threatened them, and perhaps, if fortune smiled upon him, he might have the chance to know Charlotte Brennan better, much better. The rain continued its relentless assault on Boston as James made his way to the police laboratory, the box of chocolates held carefully under his coat. His mind raced with possibilities, but through it all, one image remained constant. Charlotte's hazel eyes looking at him with trust and hope, as if she believed he could make everything right. James vowed he would not disappoint her. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across Boston's awakening streets. James had spent most of the night at the police laboratory, working with the chemist to analyze the chocolates. The results confirmed his suspicions. Arsenic, carefully measured doses designed to cause illness rather than immediate death. It was a warning, perhaps, or the first step in a more sinister plan. Now, as he walked through the hotel lobby toward the tea room, James felt an unfamiliar nervousness flutter in his chest. He had dressed with particular care that morning, choosing his finest charcoal suit and ensuring his appearance was impeccable. He told himself it was professional courtesy, but the truth whispered differently in his mind. Charlotte was already seated when he arrived, positioned near a window where soft light illuminated her features. She wore a dress of deep burgundy that complemented her auburn hair, which was styled elegantly beneath a small hat, adorned with a single feather. When she saw him, her face brightened with a smile that made James's heart skip a beat. Detective Whitmore, she greeted him as he approached, rising slightly from her chair in acknowledgement. Miss Brennan, please, remain seated, James said, taking the chair across from her. The tea room was modestly populated with other guests, their quiet conversations creating a pleasant murmur of background sound. How is Mrs. Hartley this morning? Much improved, thank heaven, Charlotte replied, her relief evident. The physician visited again at dawn and declared her out of immediate danger. She's resting comfortably now, though still quite weak. I sat with her through most of the night, ensuring she wanted for nothing. You must be exhausted, James observed, noticing the faint shadows beneath her eyes that somehow only enhanced her beauty. I confess I am rather tired, Charlotte admitted, but I could not rest knowing she might take a turn for the worse. Detective, have you learned anything about those dreadful chocolates? James leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. The laboratory confirmed the presence of arsenic. Someone deliberately tried to poison Mrs. Hartley. The dosage was not immediately fatal, but continued consumption would have proven lethal. Charlotte's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Dear God, who would do such a thing? Mrs. Hartley has never harmed anyone in her life. That's precisely what I need to understand, James said gently. Miss Brennan, Charlotte, may I call you Charlotte? Given the circumstances, I feel we should dispense with excessive formality. A delicate blush colored her cheeks. Yes, of course. And you must call me Charlotte. Under these circumstances, Such informality seems appropriate. Charlotte, James said, savoring the sound of her name on his lips. I need you to tell me everything you know about Mrs. Hartley's life, her relationships, her finances. No detail is too small. The person who sent those chocolates knew where she was staying, which suggests they've been watching her movements. Charlotte folded her hands in her lap, her expression thoughtful. Mrs. Hartley's late husband, Charles Hartley, was the president of Philadelphia Mercantile Bank. When he died suddenly 2 years ago, it was discovered he had been quite clever with investments. The fortune he left behind was substantially larger than anyone expected, nearly $400,000. James whistled softly. That's a considerable sum, enough to inspire greed in many hearts. Indeed, Charlotte continued. The distant cousin I mentioned yesterday, Edmund Hartley, believed he should inherit the bulk of the estate. He claimed that Charles had promised him a partnership in the bank, and that Catherine had manipulated her husband into changing his will. The courts disagreed, finding no evidence of undue influence. Edmund was furious with the verdict. Where is Edmund Hartley now? James asked, making notes in his ever-present notebook. He lives in Boston, actually. That's one reason we came here. Rather ironic given recent events. Mrs. Hartley hoped to meet with him to offer him a settlement that might end the family discord. She's a kind woman, Detective, she truly is. Despite how horribly Edmund treated her during the legal proceedings, she wanted to make peace. James felt a chill run down his spine. She came to Boston to meet with a man who has reason to resent her, and within days, she's poisoned. Charlotte, I don't believe in coincidences of this magnitude. Do you know if this meeting has taken place? No, it hasn't, Charlotte replied. Mrs. Hartley sent a letter to his residence the day we arrived requesting an audience. She received no reply. That was 3 days ago. 3 days ago, James repeated, his mind working rapidly. The same day the chocolates arrived. Charlotte, I need the address of Edmund Hartley's residence. I must speak with him immediately. Charlotte reached into her small handbag and produced a folded piece of paper. I anticipated you might need this. It's the address where Mrs. Hartley sent her letter, along with addresses of several other individuals who might be relevant to your investigation. James took the paper, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. The contact was electric, sending warmth rushing through his entire body. He saw Charlotte's eyes widen slightly, and he knew she had felt it too, this inexplicable connection forming between them. You're remarkably thorough, James said, his voice slightly huskier than usual. You would make an excellent detective yourself. I've always been observant, Charlotte said softly, her gaze locked with his. My father used to say I noticed things others overlooked. He was a teacher, you see, and he instilled in me a love of knowledge and careful attention to detail. Your father sounds like he was a wise man, James said. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, Charlotte replied, a shadow of old grief crossing her features. He and my mother died in a railway accident 3 years ago. I was left with very little, just enough to maintain modest lodgings for a few months. That's when Mrs. Hartley found me. She had known my mother slightly through charitable work. She offered me employment as her companion, and it has been a blessing beyond measure. James felt a surge of protectiveness toward this brave young woman who had faced such tragedy with grace and dignity. She's fortunate to have you, Charlotte. Your loyalty and intelligence are admirable qualities. And you, Detective, what led you to this profession? Charlotte asked, and James was pleased by her interest in knowing him better. My father was a detective before me, James explained, relaxing into the conversation. He taught me to see beyond the surface of things, to understand that truth often hides in shadows. When he was killed investigating a robbery 5 years ago, I vowed to continue his work, to seek justice for those who cannot seek it for themselves. I'm so sorry, Charlotte said with genuine compassion. We've both known loss then. Perhaps that's why I feel I can trust you so completely, though we've only just met. You understand what it means to lose someone important. Yes, James agreed, holding her gaze. I believe I do. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the connection between them deepening without need for words. James had investigated countless cases, met hundreds of people, but never had he felt this immediate and profound attraction to anyone. Charlotte was intelligent, brave, kind, and beautiful, a combination that left him thoroughly captivated. Charlotte, James said, breaking the silence, I want you to promise me something. Until we identify who poisoned Mrs. Hartley and ensure they're no longer a threat, please be extremely careful. Don't accept any packages or gifts unless you're absolutely certain of their origin. Stay in public areas of the hotel as much as possible, and trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. You believe I might be in danger as well? Charlotte asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. I don't know, James admitted honestly, but you're close to Mrs. Hartley. You're a potential witness, and I cannot bear the thought of anything happening to you. The last words slipped out before James could stop them, revealing more of his feelings than he had intended. Charlotte's eyes widened, and a deep blush colored her cheeks, but she didn't look away. I promise to be careful, she said softly, and I appreciate your concern, Detective. It's comforting to know someone is watching over us. James wanted to tell her that he would always watch over her, that from the moment he had seen her descending those hotel stairs, something fundamental had shifted in his world. But such declarations were premature, perhaps inappropriate given the circumstances. Instead, he simply nodded and returned to the matter at hand. I should visit Edmund Hartley today, James said, consulting the address Charlotte had provided. His residence is in the Back Bay area, not far from here. While I'm gone, please stay with Mrs. Hartley. If anything unusual happens, anything at all, send word to me immediately at the police station. I will, Charlotte promised. Then, hesitantly, she added, James, may I call you James? You must be careful as well. If Edmund is responsible and realizes you're investigating him, you could be placing yourself in danger. The sound of his name on her lips was sweeter than any music James had ever heard. James is perfectly acceptable, he said with a warm smile, and I appreciate your concern, but I've been doing this work for many years. I know how to handle dangerous men. I'm sure you do, Charlotte said, returning his smile, but humor me by being cautious nonetheless. I should very much like to see you again, to know how your investigation progresses. Nothing could prevent me from returning to give you updates, James assured her, meaning every word. In fact, if you're agreeable, perhaps we might dine together this evening. I could report my findings, and we could discuss the case further in a more relaxed setting. Charlotte's face lit with pleasure. I would enjoy that very much. Mrs. Hartley will likely sleep most of the evening, and the hotel has a lovely dining room. Shall we say 7 o'clock? 7 o'clock is perfect, James agreed, already anticipating the evening with more enthusiasm than any social engagement had ever inspired in him. They rose together, and James offered his arm to escort Charlotte back to the lobby. She accepted gracefully, and they walked slowly, both reluctant for the meeting to end. At the base of the grand staircase, they paused. Until this evening, then, Charlotte said, her hand still resting lightly on his arm. Until this evening, James echoed. On impulse, he lifted her gloved hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Stay safe, Charlotte. He saw the flutter of her pulse at her throat, the way her breath caught slightly, and knew his gesture had affected her as much as touching her affected him. She smiled, a radiant expression that made James feel like the luckiest man in Boston, then turned and ascended the stairs with graceful steps. James watched until she disappeared from view, then turned toward the hotel exit with renewed determination. He would solve this case, protect Charlotte and Mrs. Hartley from whoever threatened them, and then, if fortune favored him, he would have the opportunity to explore these powerful feelings growing in his heart. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets clean and glistening in the afternoon sun. James hailed a hansom cab and gave the driver Edmund Hartley's address. As the horse-drawn carriage clattered over the cobblestones, James reviewed everything Charlotte had told him, organizing the information into a coherent theory. Edmund Hartley had motive, certainly financial gain if Mrs. Hartley died without an heir. He had opportunity, knowing she would be in Boston and possibly learning her hotel from her letter. But did he have the character of a poisoner? That remained to be seen. The Back Bay area was one of Boston's most prestigious neighborhoods, with elegant brownstone homes lining tree-shaded streets. Edmund Hartley's residence was a 3-story townhouse with an imposing facade and iron railings. James paid the cab driver and approached the front door, pulling the bell cord. A butler answered, his expression one of practiced neutrality. "May I help you, sir?" "Detective James Whitmore, Boston Police Department," James said, producing his credentials. "I need to speak with Mr. Edmund Hartley regarding an urgent matter." The butler's expression flickered with something, concern perhaps, or fear. "I'm afraid Mr. Hartley is not receiving visitors today, sir. If you would care to leave a card." This is a police investigation into an attempted murder, James said firmly. I'm not requesting an audience. I'm informing you that I will speak with Mr. Hartley immediately, or I will return with a warrant and several officers. The choice is his. The butler's composure cracked slightly at James's words. He stepped back, opening the door wider. Please wait in the entrance hall, Detective. I will inform Mr. Hartley of your presence. James entered the townhouse, immediately noting the opulent surroundings. Crystal chandeliers hung from ornate ceiling medallions, oil paintings in gilded frames adorned the walls, and a grand staircase curved upward to the second floor. Everything spoke of wealth, yet there was something hollow about it, as if the house were more a display than a home. He didn't have to wait long. Heavy footsteps descended the stairs, and a man appeared, his face flushed with irritation. Edmund Hartley was in his mid-40s with thinning dark hair, a thick mustache, and the beginnings of a substantial belly straining against his waistcoat. His eyes were small and calculating, darting over James with unconcealed hostility. "Detective Whitmore, is it?" Edmund said, his voice carrying the affected accent of someone trying to sound more cultured than he was. "My butler says you're investigating an attempted murder. I cannot imagine what that has to do with me." "Can't you?" James replied coolly. "Mr. Hartley, I'm investigating the poisoning of Mrs. Catherine Hartley, your late cousin's widow. She nearly died 2 nights ago from arsenic-laced chocolates delivered to her hotel room. I understand you have had considerable conflict with Mrs. Hartley over your cousin's estate." Edmund's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "That's preposterous. Are you accusing me of attempted murder based solely on a civil dispute that was settled by the courts over a year ago?" "I'm not accusing anyone yet," James said, his detective's instincts noting every flicker of emotion across Edmund's features. "I'm gathering information. Mrs. Hartley came to Boston specifically to meet with you to offer reconciliation. She sent you a letter 3 days ago, the same day she received the poisoned chocolates." "I never received any letter from Catherine," Edmund protested, but his eyes shifted away from James's steady gaze. "And even if I had, why would I poison her now? The estate is settled. There's nothing more to be gained." "Isn't there?" James challenged. "Mrs. Hartley is a wealthy woman with no direct heirs. If she were to die intestate, or if her will were contested successfully, you as a blood relative might have a claim to her fortune. $400,000 is quite an incentive for murder, Mr. Hartley." Edmund's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I resent your implications, Detective. Yes, I was angry about the will. Charles promised me a partnership in his bank, promised me security for my future. When he died and left everything to that woman, I felt betrayed. But that doesn't make me a murderer. I have my own business interests, my own income. I don't need Catherine's money." James looked around the expensive hallway pointedly. "This house, these furnishings, they all suggest considerable wealth. Yet my colleagues at the Financial Crimes Division tell me your business interests have been struggling lately. Several bad investments, mounting debts. A man in financial difficulty might become desperate." Edmund's face went pale, then flushed again with rage. "You've been investigating my finances. How dare you? I want to speak with your superior officer. This is harassment, nothing more." "This is a murder investigation," James corrected firmly. "And I will investigate every lead until I find the person responsible." "Mr. Hartley, where were you 3 nights ago between the hours of 3 and 6 in the afternoon?" "I was here, at home, working in my study," Edmund said stiffly. "My household staff can confirm it." "Staff who depend on you for their employment," James observed. "Not exactly impartial witnesses. Did anyone else see you? Did you have any visitors, any business appointments?" Edmund hesitated, and James knew he had hit upon something. "I had a visitor, yes, a business associate, but I'm not at liberty to discuss our dealings. In a murder investigation, Mr. Hartley, you're at liberty to discuss anything I ask about, or you can discuss it in a police interrogation room. Your choice." Edmund's jaw worked furiously, but he finally relented. "Very well. I was meeting with Mr. Lawrence Pemberton. We were discussing a potential business venture. He arrived around 3 o'clock and left around 6. Is that sufficient for your purposes, Detective?" James felt a surge of interest. Lawrence Pemberton, the same man Charlotte had mentioned as having pursued Mrs. Hartley's favor unsuccessfully. 2 men with grievances against Mrs. Hartley, meeting on the very day she was poisoned. It couldn't be coincidence. "What was the nature of this business venture?" James pressed. "That's confidential," Edmund insisted. "Commercial matters that have nothing to do with Catherine or your investigation." "I'll be the judge of what's relevant to my investigation," James said. "But I'll speak with Mr. Pemberton directly. Where can I find him?" Edmund smirked slightly, as if pleased to redirect James's attention elsewhere. "Lawrence keeps rooms at the Somerset Club. You'll likely find him there in the afternoons, playing cards and drinking brandy. Now, if we're finished, Detective, I have business to attend to." "One more question," James said. "Did you know Mrs. Hartley was staying at the Pemberton Hotel?" Something flickered in Edmund's eyes, a momentary calculation. "The Pemberton? No, I had no idea. As I said, I never received her letter. If I had known she was in Boston, I might have contacted her myself. Despite our past difficulties, she is family after all." James didn't believe him for a moment. Everything about Edmund Hartley suggested deception, from his shifty eyes to his defensive posture. But without concrete evidence, James couldn't arrest him. Not yet. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Hartley," James said, moving toward the door. "I'm sure we'll speak again soon. And Mr. Hartley, don't leave Boston without informing me. I may have additional questions." Edmund's face darkened with fury, but he said nothing, simply gesturing for the butler to show James out. As James stepped back into the afternoon sunshine, he felt certain Edmund Hartley knew more than he was admitting. But was he a murderer, or simply a bitter man nursing old grudges? James consulted his pocket watch. It was nearly 4 o'clock. He had time to visit the Somerset Club before his dinner engagement with Charlotte. The thought of seeing her again sent warmth spreading through his chest. He had been with her only that morning, yet it felt like days had passed. The intensity of his feelings both thrilled and unsettled him. James had always been cautious with his heart, focused on his career, convinced that marriage and detective work mixed poorly. Yet Charlotte had shattered those convictions with a single distressed plea for help on a hotel staircase. The Somerset Club was an exclusive gentleman's establishment housed in a stately building on Beacon Street. James presented his credentials at the door and was grudgingly admitted by a stern-faced doorman who clearly disapproved of police presence in such refined surroundings. Inside, the club smelled of leather, tobacco, and old money. Men in expensive suits lounged in deep armchairs, reading newspapers or engaged in quiet conversation. James spotted Lawrence Pemberton almost immediately. He was a handsome man in his late 30s, with sandy hair, a well-groomed beard, and an air of easy confidence. He sat at a card table with 3 other gentlemen, a glass of amber liquid at his elbow. "Mr. Lawrence Pemberton." James approached the table, aware of the sudden silence that fell over the room. Pemberton looked up, his blue eyes assessing James with cool detachment. "I am. And you are?" "Detective James Whitmore, Boston Police. I need to speak with you privately regarding Mrs. Catherine Hartley." Pemberton's expression didn't change, but his companions exchanged glances. "Catherine? What about her?" "Privately, Mr. Pemberton," James repeated firmly. Pemberton sighed, set down his cards, and rose from the table. "Gentlemen, if you'll excuse me, this shouldn't take long." He led James to a quiet corner of the club, away from curious ears. "Now, Detective, what's this about Catherine? I haven't seen her in months." "Mrs. Hartley is currently in Boston, staying at the Pemberton Hotel," James began, watching Pemberton's reaction carefully. 2 nights ago, she was poisoned by chocolates delivered to her room. She survived, but whoever sent those chocolates clearly wanted her dead or seriously harmed. Pemberton's face registered what appeared to be genuine shock. "Good God, poisoned? Is she all right? Who would do such a thing?" "That's what I'm trying to determine," James said. "I understand you courted Mrs. Hartley's favor after her husband died, but she rejected your advances." Pemberton's jaw tightened, and a flush of embarrassment colored his cheeks. "Catherine told you that? Or was it that meddling companion of hers, Miss Brennan?" The dismissive way he spoke Charlotte's name made James's hands clench, but he kept his voice level. "My source is irrelevant. What matters is whether you hold any resentment toward Mrs. Hartley for her rejection." "Resentment?" Pemberton laughed bitterly. "Detective, I'm not some lovesick boy. Yes, I courted Catherine. She's beautiful, wealthy, and I thought we might make a good match. She disagreed. I accepted her decision and moved on. There are plenty of other wealthy widows in Boston." "How mercenary of you," James observed dryly. "Mr. Pemberton, where were you 3 nights ago?" "Let me think," Pemberton said, his tone now defensive. 3 nights ago would have been Tuesday. I was visiting Edmund Hartley at his townhouse. We're discussing a business venture together, a real estate development in the South End. We met from 3 until 6. Then I returned here for dinner. Can anyone besides Mr. Hartley confirm your presence at his home? James asked. His household staff saw me arrive and depart, Pemberton said. Beyond that, Edmund and I were alone in his study, discussing financial projections and property surveys. Why? Am I a suspect in this poisoning? Everyone with motive and opportunity is a suspect until I prove otherwise, James replied. Did you know Mrs. Hartley was in Boston? I had no idea, Pemberton insisted. As I said, I haven't seen or spoken with Catherine in months. After she made clear that my suit was unwelcome, I respected her wishes and kept my distance. Detective, I may be many things, but I'm not a murderer. The idea that I would poison a woman over a rejected marriage proposal is absurd. James studied Pemberton's face, looking for signs of deception. The man seemed sincere, but James had met many accomplished liars in his career. What's the nature of this business venture with Edmund Hartley? 2 men with grievances against Mrs. Hartley meeting on the very day she's poisoned seems remarkably coincidental. It's a real estate development, nothing more, Pemberton said impatiently. Edmund has connections with the city planning office, and I have the capital. We're purchasing several properties that we believe will appreciate significantly when the city extends the streetcar line. It's completely legitimate business, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with Catherine. I'll need to verify that, James said, making notes. Don't leave Boston without informing me, Mr. Pemberton. I may have additional questions. Pemberton's expression hardened. Am I being detained, Detective? Not at present, James replied. But this is an active investigation into attempted murder. I expect your full cooperation. You have it, Pemberton said coldly. Now, if you're finished disrupting my afternoon, I'd like to return to my card game. James nodded and watched as Pemberton walked back to his companions, their heads immediately bending together in whispered conversation. James left the club feeling frustrated. Both Edmund Hartley and Lawrence Pemberton had motive and opportunity, but their stories corroborated each other, providing mutual alibis. Were they working together, or was James missing something crucial? The evening found James back at the Pemberton Hotel, his mind churning with the day's discoveries as he prepared for dinner with Charlotte. He had returned to his modest apartment to change into his evening attire, selecting a black suit with a crisp white shirt and his best silk cravat. As he adjusted his collar in the mirror, James barely recognized the nervous man staring back at him. He had faced armed criminals without flinching, yet the prospect of dining with Charlotte Brennan made his heart race like a schoolboy's. The hotel's dining room was an elegant space with white tablecloths, gleaming silverware, and soft light from gas chandeliers that cast a warm glow over everything. James arrived precisely at 7 o'clock and was shown to a table near the window, where he could watch the street outside while maintaining a view of the room's entrance. He didn't have to wait long. Charlotte appeared in the doorway at 5 minutes past 7, and James's breath caught in his throat. She wore a gown of midnight blue silk that complemented her auburn hair beautifully. The dress was elegant without being ostentatious. The bodice fitted perfectly to her slender frame, and the skirt fell in graceful folds to the floor. She had arranged her hair in an elaborate style that left a few soft curls framing her face, and her hazel eyes sparkled with warmth as they found him across the room. James stood immediately, moving to meet her. "Charlotte, you look absolutely radiant," he said, offering his arm. "Thank you, James," she replied, a becoming blush coloring her cheeks. "You look quite distinguished yourself." He escorted her to their table, acutely aware of the envious glances from other men in the dining room. Once they were seated and had ordered their meal, Charlotte leaned forward slightly, her expression eager and concerned. "Tell me everything," she said. "Did you speak with Edmund Hartley? What did you discover?" James smiled at her enthusiasm, appreciating her quick mind and genuine interest. "I did speak with him, and with Lawrence Pemberton as well. Both men had motive and opportunity, but they also provide alibis for each other. They claim they were together at Edmund's townhouse during the time the chocolates were likely delivered." Charlotte's brow furrowed thoughtfully. "Do you believe them?" "I'm not certain," James admitted. "Edmund Hartley is clearly in financial difficulty, despite his outward show of wealth. He would benefit greatly from Mrs. Hartley's death. Pemberton seems less obviously motivated by revenge, but rejection can wound a man's pride deeply. What troubles me most is their meeting on the very day Mrs. Hartley was poisoned. Could they be working together? Charlotte suggested, her intelligence shining through. Perhaps they conspired to harm Mrs. Hartley, each providing the other with an alibi. That's precisely what I've been considering, James said, impressed by how quickly she had reached the same conclusion. But I need evidence, not just suspicion. I've arranged for officers to make discreet inquiries about both men, their finances, their movements over the past week. Something will emerge, I'm certain of it. Their first course arrived, a delicate soup that filled the air with savory aromas. As they ate, their conversation flowed naturally, moving from the investigation to more personal topics. James found himself telling Charlotte about his childhood, his father's dedication to justice, the lessons he had learned about seeing truth beneath deception. My father used to say that everyone wears masks, James explained, his voice warm with memory. The detective's job is to see past those masks to the real person beneath. He taught me to observe not just what people say, but how they say it, the small gestures and expressions that reveal their true thoughts. Your father sounds like he was a remarkable man, Charlotte said softly. You must miss him terribly. Every day, James admitted, surprised by how easily he could share his grief with her. But I honor his memory by continuing his work, by seeking justice for those who need it most. Like you and Mrs. Hartley. Charlotte reached across the table, her gloved hand resting gently on his. The touch, even through the fabric, sent electricity coursing through James's entire body. I'm so grateful you're handling this investigation, James. I feel safe knowing you're protecting us. James turned his hand over, gently clasping hers. Charlotte, I need to tell you something. From the moment I saw you on those hotel stairs, something changed for me. I've investigated hundreds of cases, but I've never felt this way about anyone involved in them. You're not just a witness or someone I'm protecting. You're becoming something far more important to me. Charlotte's eyes widened, and her lips parted slightly in surprise. James, She paused, seeming to gather her courage. I feel it too. This connection between us, it's unlike anything I've experienced. I know it's sudden, perhaps improper to speak of such things so soon, but I cannot deny what's in my heart. Before James could respond, a commotion at the dining room entrance drew their attention. A hotel employee was speaking urgently with the maitre d', gesturing toward their table. James felt his detective instincts flare to life, his hand instinctively moving to Charlotte's in a protective gesture. The maitre d' approached quickly, his expression grave. Miss Brennan, Detective Whitmore, I apologize for the interruption, but there's been an incident. A package was just delivered to Mrs. Hartley's room. The maid who brought it to her noticed a strange chemical smell emanating from it and had the good sense not to let Mrs. Hartley open it. The hotel manager requests Detective Whitmore's immediate presence. James was on his feet instantly, his mind already racing. Charlotte, stay here where there are people around. Don't go anywhere alone. I'm coming with you, Charlotte said firmly, rising as well. Mrs. Hartley is my responsibility, and I won't hide while she's in danger. James wanted to argue, to insist she remain safe, but he saw the determination in her eyes and knew it would be futile. Very well, but stay close to me. If there's any danger, I want you behind me. Understood? Understood, Charlotte agreed, and together they hurried from the dining room. They took the stairs two at a time, James's hand hovering near Charlotte's elbow, ready to steady her if she stumbled in her elegant gown. When they reached Mrs. Hartley's suite, they found the door open and several hotel staff gathered in the hallway, speaking in hushed, worried tones. Inside, Mrs. Hartley sat in an armchair, looking pale but alert. She had recovered significantly from the poisoning, though she still appeared fragile. On the table before her sat a package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Even from the doorway, James could detect a faint, acrid smell. Detective Whitmore, Mrs. Hartley said, her voice stronger than James had expected. Thank heavens you're here. My maid, Annie, she's the one who noticed the smell. I think it may have saved my life. James approached the package carefully, kneeling to examine it without touching. The chemical odor was stronger up close, reminiscent of the arsenic from the chocolates, but with something else mixed in, something more volatile. His years of experience told him this was no simple poison this time. Everyone needs to leave this room immediately, James said with quiet authority. This package may contain not just poison, but something explosive. Charlotte, Mrs. Hartley, please go downstairs to the lobby. Hotel staff, evacuate this floor and the floors above and below. Do it calmly to avoid panic, but do it now. The urgency in his voice spurred everyone to action. Charlotte helped Mrs. Hartley to her feet, and James saw the fear in Charlotte's eyes as she looked back at him. James, you need to come with us. If it's dangerous, I'll be right behind you, James promised. But I need to examine this first, determine how immediate the threat is. Go, Charlotte, please. Charlotte hesitated, clearly torn between her concern for him and the need to get Mrs. Hartley to safety. Finally, she nodded and guided the older woman toward the door. Please be careful, James. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you. I will, James assured her, watching until she disappeared into the hallway before turning his full attention to the package. Working with extreme caution, James used a letter opener from the desk to carefully loosen the string without pulling or jostling the package. The brown paper fell away, revealing a wooden box with a hinged lid. Through small gaps in the wood, James could see glass vials secured inside, their contents a murky yellowish liquid. His blood ran cold. This wasn't just poison meant to sicken. This was nitroglycerin, highly unstable and deadly if detonated. Whoever had sent this intended to kill not just Mrs. Hartley, but anyone in the vicinity. The thought of Charlotte being in this room when the package exploded made James's hands shake with barely controlled rage. He forced himself to remain calm, to think clearly. Nitroglycerin was sensitive to heat, shock, and vibration. Moving it was incredibly dangerous, but leaving it here was unacceptable. James carefully lifted the box, his movements slow and measured, barely breathing as he carried it to the open window. The suite was on the 3rd floor, overlooking a small courtyard garden that was, thankfully, empty at this hour. With a prayer and a precise throw, James launched the box out the window, then threw himself to the floor. The explosion that followed was deafening. The windows shattered inward, showering James with glass. The floor shook, and somewhere in the distance he could hear screaming and the sound of running feet. But he was alive, and more importantly, Charlotte and Mrs. Hartley were safe. James picked himself up, brushing glass from his suit. His ears rang from the blast, and he had several small cuts on his face and hands, but nothing serious. He made his way downstairs where chaos reigned in the lobby. Hotel guests and staff crowded together, some crying, others demanding explanations. Through the confusion, James spotted Charlotte, and their eyes met across the room. She ran to him, her face streaked with tears, and James caught her in his arms without thinking, propriety forgotten in the aftermath of such danger. James, oh God, James, I heard the explosion. I thought you were dead. I'm all right, he murmured into her hair, holding her tightly. I'm all right, Charlotte. You're safe. That's what matters. They stood like that for a long moment, both trembling with relief and the aftermath of fear. When they finally stepped apart, James became aware of the curious stares directed at them. But he didn't care. Charlotte was safe. Mrs. Hartley was safe. Everything else was secondary. Mrs. Hartley approached them, supported by a concerned hotel manager. Detective Whitmore, you saved my life again, and the lives of countless others in this hotel. How can I ever thank you? By helping me catch whoever is doing this, James said, his detective's mind already working despite the shock. Mrs. Hartley, this has escalated beyond simple poisoning. Someone wants you dead badly enough to use explosives. I need you to think very carefully. Is there anyone at all who would benefit from your death beyond the obvious financial motives? Mrs. Hartley's face was thoughtful, and then something flickered in her eyes, a realization. Detective, there is something. A few months ago, I discovered some irregularities in my late husband's bank records. Charles kept meticulous personal ledgers, and after his death, I was going through them. I found evidence that someone had been embezzling from the bank for years, small amounts that accumulated to nearly $50,000. James felt his pulse quicken. Did you know who was responsible? I had suspicions, Mrs. Hartley said slowly. The pattern of withdrawals suggested someone with access to the accounts, someone Charles trusted. I was planning to turn this information over to the authorities, but then the legal battle with Edmund began, and I became distracted. I brought the ledgers with me to Boston, intending to visit the police after I resolved matters with Edmund. Where are these ledgers now? James asked urgently. In my trunk, in the hotel's storage room, Mrs. Hartley replied. Detective, do you think this is about the embezzlement rather than inheritance? I think it might be both, James said, his mind racing through the implications. Someone who embezzled from your husband's bank would be desperate to prevent those ledgers from reaching the police. If you died, the ledgers might be overlooked or destroyed in settling your estate. Mrs. Hartley, I need to see those ledgers immediately. The hotel manager led them to the storage room, a secure area in the basement where guests' trunks and valuables were kept. Mrs. Hartley identified her trunk, a large leather case with brass fittings, and the manager produced a key. Inside, beneath layers of carefully packed clothing, was a leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with Charles Hartley's precise handwriting. James examined the entries by lamplight, his trained eye quickly identifying the irregularities Mrs. Hartley had mentioned. Small withdrawals, always under amounts that would trigger scrutiny, always on days when Charles Hartley had been away from the bank. And there, in the margin of one page, a notation in Charles's hand. Discuss PL discrepancies with Edmund. PL, James said aloud. Philip Lawrence or Lawrence Pemberton? Mrs. Hartley gasped. Lawrence Pemberton worked at my husband's bank. He was a senior clerk handling large accounts. Charles mentioned him often, said he was ambitious and clever with numbers. Everything clicked into place in James's mind. Lawrence Pemberton hadn't courted Mrs. Hartley out of affection or even simple gold digging. He had been trying to gain access to her late husband's records, to discover if she had found evidence of his embezzlement. When she rejected him, he must have grown desperate, especially if he learned she was bringing those ledgers to Boston. And Edmund Hartley, James continued, following the logic. If his cousin Charles had discovered the embezzlement and planned to discuss it with Edmund before his death, Edmund might have known about it too. Perhaps Pemberton offered him a share of the stolen money in exchange for his help in eliminating Mrs. Hartley and destroying the evidence. Their business venture, Charlotte said, her quick mind making the same connections. It wasn't real estate development at all. It was a cover story, a reason for them to be seen together without arousing suspicion. Precisely, James said grimly, and their mutual alibis for the day of the poisoning suddenly make perfect sense. They were together, but not for legitimate business. They were planning Mrs. Hartley's murder. James turned to the hotel manager. I need you to send for police backup immediately. We're going to arrest Lawrence Pemberton and Edmund Hartley tonight. Charlotte, Mrs. Hartley, I need you both to stay here in the hotel, in the manager's office where you'll be safe and surrounded by people. I don't want either of you alone until these men are in custody. James, be careful, Charlotte said, catching his hand. If these men are desperate enough to use explosives, they won't hesitate to harm you. I know, James said, squeezing her hand gently. But this is my job, Charlotte. This is what I do. Trust me to see it through. I do trust you, Charlotte said softly. Completely. Just promise me you'll come back. James raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles as he had that morning, but this time lingering a moment longer. I promise. And when I return, there are things I want to say to you, important things. I'll be waiting, Charlotte whispered, her eyes shining with emotion. Within the hour, James had gathered a team of officers and secured warrants for both Pemberton and Edmund Hartley's arrests. They went first to the Somerset Club, where Pemberton was found in the same card room, his composure cracking when he saw James approach with uniformed officers. Lawrence Pemberton, James said formally, you're under arrest for attempted murder, embezzlement, and the use of explosives with intent to kill. You have the right to remain silent. Pemberton's face went white, then red with fury. This is absurd. You have no evidence. We have Charles Hartley's ledgers, James said coldly. We have proof of your embezzlement, and we have witnesses who can place you at the hotel today, delivering that package. It's over, Pemberton. The fight went out of Pemberton then, his shoulders sagging in defeat. As the officers led him away in handcuffs, James felt a grim satisfaction. One down, one to go. Edmund Hartley proved more difficult. When they arrived at his townhouse, they found him in the process of packing, clearly planning to flee. The sight of James and the police officers sent him into a panic. He tried to run, bolting through the house toward a back exit, but James was faster. Years of chasing criminals had made him quick and strong. He caught Edmund in the garden, tackling him to the ground among the carefully tended flower beds. It was all Pemberton's idea, Edmund gasped as James hauled him to his feet. He came to me, told me Catherine had evidence that could implicate us both. He said if we eliminated her, we could split what was left of the embezzled money, and no one would ever know. I didn't want to do it, but I was desperate. My debts. They were crushing me. Tell it to the judge, James said without sympathy, turning Edmund over to the waiting officers. It was past midnight when James finally returned to the Pemberton Hotel. The lobby had emptied of all but a few staff members and some residents too shaken to sleep. James found Charlotte exactly where he had left her, in the manager's office, sitting beside Mrs. Hartley. Both women looked exhausted but alert, and when Charlotte saw him, she jumped to her feet. "James, thank God. Are they arrested? Is it truly over?" "It's over," James confirmed, feeling the exhaustion of the day settling into his bones. "Both men are in custody and both have confessed. They'll be tried for attempted murder and embezzlement. Mrs. Hartley, you'll need to testify, but I promise the police department will ensure your safety throughout the process." "I'll do whatever is necessary," Mrs. Hartley said firmly. Then, with a knowing smile, she added, "But right now I believe I should retire to my room, or rather, to a new room the hotel has graciously provided. The two of you clearly have things to discuss. Charlotte, take your time. I'll be perfectly fine." Charlotte blushed deeply, but she didn't protest as Mrs. Hartley left, accompanied by the hotel manager and 2 police officers James had assigned to guard her. Alone in the office, James and Charlotte stood looking at each other, the events of the evening hanging between them like a shared secret. "I was so frightened," Charlotte said quietly. "When I heard that explosion, when I didn't know if you were alive or dead, I realized how much you've come to mean to me in such a short time. It should be impossible to care so deeply for someone after only 2 days. But James, I can't deny what I feel." James crossed the room to her, taking both her hands in his. "Charlotte, I've spent my entire adult life dedicated to my work, convinced that I couldn't have both a career and a personal life. Then you appeared, and suddenly everything I thought I knew about myself changed. These past 2 days, working with you, getting to know you, nearly losing you, it's made me realize that life without you would be unbearably empty." "James," Charlotte breathed, her eyes filling with tears of joy. "I know it's sudden," James continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I know we've only just met. But Charlotte, I'm falling in love with you. I think I started falling the moment I saw you on those stairs. Desperate and brave and beautiful. And if you'll give me the chance, if you'll allow me to court you properly, I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy." "Yes," Charlotte said, laughing and crying at once. "Yes, James, yes to all of it. I'm falling in love with you too. It's terrifying and wonderful and completely unexpected, but it's real. This is real." James pulled her into his arms, and they stood together in the quiet office, holding each other as the night deepened around them. Outside, Boston slept, unaware that 2 people had found something rare and precious in the midst of danger and darkness. "What happens now?" Charlotte asked after a long moment, her head resting against James's chest. "Now," James said, smiling down at her, "we take things one day at a time. I'll finish the paperwork on this case, ensure Pemberton and Edmund face justice. You and Mrs. Hartley will give your testimony when the time comes. And in between all of that, I'm going to court you properly. Dinners, walks through the park, visits to museums, all the things courting couples do. I want to know everything about you, Charlotte. Your favorite books, your dreams for the future, what makes you laugh. I want the same," Charlotte said, reaching up to touch his face gently. "Though I already know the most important things. You're brave and kind and dedicated to justice. You risk your life for others without hesitation. You've shown me what true courage looks like." "You're the brave one," James countered. "You stayed calm in the face of danger, helped with the investigation, trusted me to protect you. Charlotte, you're remarkable." They stood together a while longer, neither wanting the moment to end, but eventually, propriety demanded they separate. James escorted Charlotte to her new room, the one next to Mrs. Hartley's, where officers stood guard in the hallway. At her door, they paused. "Tomorrow," James said, "I'll come by in the afternoon. We'll take a walk if the weather permits, somewhere peaceful where we can talk without interruptions." "I'd like that," Charlotte said. Then, with a boldness that made James's heart soar, she stood on tiptoe and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. "Good night, James. Sweet dreams." "Good night, Charlotte," James replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Dream of me. Always," she promised, slipping into her room with one last radiant smile. James walked through the Boston streets toward his apartment, despite the late hour feeling more awake than he had in years. The case was solved, Justice would be served, and most incredibly, he had found Charlotte. In the space of 2 extraordinary days, his entire world had transformed. The lonely detective who had convinced himself he was meant to walk through life alone had discovered something far more valuable than solving any mystery. He had found love. Over the following weeks, as Pemberton and Edmund Hartley awaited trial, James and Charlotte's courtship flourished. They walked through Boston Common, attended concerts, shared long dinners filled with conversation and laughter. Mrs. Hartley watched their growing attachment with approval, often chaperoning their outings with a knowing smile. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, James Whitmore and Charlotte Brennan were married in a small ceremony, attended by close friends and Mrs. Hartley, who had become like family to them both. As James slipped a gold ring onto Charlotte's finger and kissed her for the first time as his wife, he reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. A crime had brought them into each other's lives, but love had made them inseparable. And as they began their life together, James knew with absolute certainty that solving the mystery of the poisoned chocolates had led him to the greatest discovery of his life, the woman who would be his partner, his love, his everything, for all the days to come.